Chapter 1. Bookk goes to the Northland.
This is a story about a dog named Bookk. Bookk is a big, strong dog. He has a thick, furry coat, and he's very healthy. Bookk lives a happy life in Santa Clara, California, with Judge Miller. He is the judge's favorite dog. Their house is in the country, and it's very big. It's a nice house with a large garden. There are fruit trees in the garden and a lot of flowers. There are huge pastures, and there are stables. There are other dogs at the judge's place too. Toots is a Japanese pug dog, and Isabel is a Mexican hairless dog. They are very strange creatures. They don't like to run outside with Bookk. They stay indoors all the time. Bookk doesn't like to stay indoors. He likes to swim and hunt. He likes to walk with the judge's daughters early in the morning. At night, he likes to lie near the judge's feet by the fireplace and sleep. Bookk loves his home. He runs all over the gardens and the pastures, and he knows all the other animals. He is the king of Judge Miller's place. It is 1897, and in America, a lot of things are changing. Many men are going north to the freezing wilderness of the Northland. There is a lot of gold in the Northland, and they are going there to find it and become rich. The men who work in the cold, snowy Northland need strong, healthy dogs to help them. They need big, heavy dogs with thick, furry coats to pull their sleds to the places where the gold is and to help them move their equipment. Manuel works at Judge Miller's place as a gardener. He isn't a good man. He is mean, and he likes gambling. Bookk doesn't like Manuel. One night, Manuel goes to the stables where Bookk is sleeping. He puts a rope around Book's neck. Bookk growls. He doesn't like the rope, but Manuel pulls him. He steals Bookk from Judge Miller's place. Now Manuel is talking to two strangers. They are not good men. They buy dogs at cheap prices and sell them to the men in the Northland for a lot of money.
Here is the dog you want. His name is Bookk,
says Manuel. Bookk growls again. Manuel is angry and pulls the rope hard. The rope is tight around Book's neck now. He can't breathe.
Here's your money. Now go. And remember, don't say anything,
says one of the strangers. The other pulls the rope around Book's neck again. Bookk feels ill. The rope is choking him. His tongue and throat hurt. This terrible treatment is new to him. He is confused and frightened. The strangers put Bookk on a train. Bookk often travels on the train with Judge Miller, but this time it's different. He is in the baggage car with the suitcases and boxes. It is cold and uncomfortable, and Bookk is afraid. One of the strangers comes near to Bookk. He tries to take the rope. Bookk growls and bites his hand. The stranger swears and beats Bookk. Later, the train stops, and the strangers take Bookk with them into a saloon. The barman asks the strangers how much money they paid for Bookk.
$100.
They reply.
Yes, I think he's worth that,
The barman says, looking at the big, healthy dog. Bookk lies in a cage in the baggage car of the train all night. He is in pain, and he can't understand what is happening. Why do these strangers want him? Why is he in this uncomfortable cage? He jumps up every time he hears a noise. When the strangers look at him, he growls. In the morning, the men take him off the train. In the daylight, Bookk looks at his new owners. They are dirty, and their clothes are very worn. They laugh at him and poke sticks through the bars of the cage to torment him. Then they put his cage on another train. It travels on for 2 days and 2 nights. They don't give Bookk any food or any water. He is very hungry and thirsty. At last, the train stops. Where is Bookk now?
Chapter 2. Bookk learns the law of the stick.
When the train stops, the stranger with the red sweater takes an axe and breaks Book's cage. Bookk runs out and jumps on him. He shows his big, strong teeth and growls at the dirty red sweater man. The man is furious. He takes a large stick and hits Bookk hard. Buck falls to the ground, astonished. He gets up and jumps on the man again. Again, the man hits Buck with the stick and he falls to the ground. Buck runs at the man a dozen times. A dozen times the man hits Buck hard with the big stick. He hits him on the nose and the pain is terrible. There is blood in Buck's mouth and on his back. He falls down again, and this time he doesn't get up. He can't fight the man anymore. He is too tired and hurt. The red sweater man talks to Buck.
Well, Buck, my boy, the fighting is finished. Now you know that I am your master. Be a good dog and you get good treatment. Be a bad dog and you get the stick. Understand?
The man pats Buck's head. He brings him a piece of meat. Buck eats it from the man's hand. He learns that he must obey a man with a stick, and it is a lesson he remembers. It is the primitive law of the stick that rules the wilderness of the Northland. Many dogs arrive on trains in boxes. They are tied up with ropes. Some of them fight the men like Buck. The men use the stick with all of them. Again and again, Buck sees this terrible treatment. He knows now that a man with a stick is the master. Dogs must obey. Buck watches the man in the red sweater. He talks to a lot of other men. They give him money. Sometimes these men take one of the dogs away with them. Buck wonders where these dogs and men go. He is glad he doesn't have to go with them. But a few days later, things change. A man buys Buck from the red sweater man. This man is small and dark. He is foreign and doesn't speak English very well. It's difficult for Buck to understand him.
Phew!
He cries when he sees Buck.
That one big dog, eh? How much?
$300, and that's a very good price,
says the red sweater man quickly. The foreign man smiles. He knows dogs. He knows that $300 is a fair price for a dog like Buck. He gives the money to the red sweater man. He also buys Curly, a big, friendly Newfoundland dog. Then Buck, Curly, and the foreign man leave the town together on a ship called the Narwhal. Buck never sees the man with the red sweater again. The foreign man's name is Perrault, and he is a French-Canadian. He works for the Canadian government. He is a mail carrier. He carries important messages to different places in the Great Northland. He travels with a French-Canadian Indian called Francois. Francois is a very tall, broad man. The two new owners are good, strong men. They are fair and calm, and Buck respects them. Buck and Curly join Perrault's other two dogs on the ship. One of them is a big, white husky called Spitz from Spitzbergen. He knows the Northland and its harsh laws. He is very clever. He steals Buck's first meal. Buck jumps at him, and Francois whips Buck for making trouble. The other dog is moody and depressed. His name is Dave. He doesn't want to be with the other dogs, and he never shows any emotion. Buck thinks he is a strange animal. The narwhal travels day and night. There is no noise but the sound of the propeller. One day is the same as the next, but Buck notices that the weather is getting colder. One morning, when he wakes up, he can't hear the propeller anymore. All the dogs on the narwhal become very excited and start barking. Francois takes the dogs up to the top of the ship. They step off the ship and into something white and soft on the shore. It feels like mud. Buck is a bit frightened. This white stuff falls from the sky onto his coat. He shakes himself, but more white stuff falls on him. Buck is very curious. He sniffs the white stuff and licks some up on his tongue. It bites like fire, but after a second the feeling is gone. He tries it again. The men are all watching Buck and laughing. He feels silly, but he doesn't know why they are laughing. This is the first time he sees snow.
Chapter 3. Buck learns the law of the fang.
Buck's first day in the strange Northland is like a nightmare. Everything he sees and touches is strange and disturbing. He remembers the judge's comfortable house in warm, sunny California and his easy, pleasant life there. Now he finds himself in a cold, harsh place where life is very primitive. There is no peace or rest here. Instead, there is a lot of confusion, noise, and danger. Here, dogs fight in ways Buck doesn't understand. They are vicious, like wolves. Curly is their first victim. She is a friendly dog and goes over to make friends with a large male husky. The husky is the size of a wolf, but he is smaller than Curly. The husky is not friendly. He looks coldly at her, then suddenly springs on her. His fangs are huge and sharp, and his jaws are very strong. He rips Curly's face with his teeth, and she squeals with pain and fear. Then something strange happens. 30 or 40 huskies come close and surround Curly and the husky dog. Curly rushes at the husky, but he moves quickly. He meets Curly in mid-air with his chest. The blow knocks her to the ground. She cannot get up. The other huskies are excited. They snarl, bark, and yelp. Buck can't understand why these dogs watch this terrible scene, why they lick their lips. Slowly, they move towards Curly. They start to bite and tear at her. She is buried under all the dogs. This is the way wolves fight. One of them jumps in and strikes quickly. Then they all attack the injured animal. Buck is shocked and afraid. Francois arrives with an axe. Men with sticks come too. They hit the dogs again and again, and at last the dogs stop biting poor Curly. The men move the dogs away from her, but her warm brown body is limp and lifeless. There is a lot of red blood on the white snow. This is the way of life in the Northland. There is no fair play, no compassion. For the men and dogs of the Northland, there is no law except the law of the stick and the fang. It is a law of pain and of power. Only the strong survive here. Soon Buck has another shock. Francois puts a lot of straps and buckles on his back. It is a sled harness. Buck remembers the harnesses on the horses in the judge's stables. Now Buck must work like horses work. He must pull Francois on the sled to the forest in the valley. Francois loads the sled with firewood. Then Buck pulls it back to the camp. Buck doesn't like the work, but he doesn't want to disobey. He remembers the stick and the pain it causes. Francois is strict and demands complete obedience. He often uses his whip. Buck is clever and learns quickly. Dave is behind Buck in the sled harness and nips Buck on his legs when he doesn't know what to do. Spitz is the leader. He knows how to pull sleds, and he is used to working in the cold and snow. But he doesn't like Buck. He often growls at him and tries to fight with him when he can. Buck learns how to pull from the other dogs. He also learns Francois's commands.
Ho!
Means stop.
Mush!
Means go. He learns that he mustn't go in front of the sled when they are going down hills.
These are good dogs,
Says Francois to Perrault.
and that Buck, he pulls very well. I teach them quick.
Perrault buys 2 more dogs for the team. Billy and Joe are full-bred huskies. They are brothers, but they have very different personalities. Billy is a friendly, happy dog, but Joe is very moody. He is often angry and aggressive. The team dogs welcome the 2 brother dogs in different ways. Buck treats them as friends. Dave ignores them, and Spitz fights with both of them. When Spitz bites Billy, he cowers away afraid. But when Spitz tries to bite Joe, Joe fights back. The fur stands up along his back, and his ears lie flat on his head. He shows his sharp teeth and snarls. Spitz doesn't bite Joe again. In the evening, Perrault brings another old husky into the camp. This dog is long and thin, with many scars on his face and only one eye. The other dogs understand that he is a fighter who has learnt the harsh laws of the Northland a long time ago, and they immediately respect him. His name is Sol-Lex, which means angry one. Like Dave, he asks for nothing, cares for nothing, and expects nothing. When Sol-Lex walks into the camp, Even Spitz doesn't dare to fight him.
Chapter 4. Buck's life in the harsh Northland.
Buck cannot sleep in the cold Northland. One night, he walks through the busy camp and into Francois and Perrault's tent to get warm. They throw the cooking utensils at him and shout at him. Dogs are not allowed in men's tents in the Northland. Buck leaves the warm tent dejectedly and lies down in the cold snow. The air is freezing, and he shivers violently. It is impossible to sleep, and soon he gets up and starts to walk around the camp again. He can't find anywhere comfortable to sleep. Other dogs are already in the best sleeping places. Eventually, Buck has an idea. He goes to lie next to his companions from the sled team. But he has a surprise. They're gone. He wanders around the big camp looking for them. Where are they? He feels lonely and depressed. He walks on and suddenly falls down through the snow. Something wriggles under him. He jumps back, snarling, then hears a friendly whimper. Buck sniffs the hole in the snow and sees a dog down there. Billy is curled up under the snow, snug and warm. He licks Buck's face with his warm, wet tongue. This is another lesson for Buck, how dogs stay warm in the Northland. Now Buck chooses a space, digs a hole, and curls up to sleep under the blanket of snow. He sleeps comfortably that night. Buck doesn't open his eyes again until he hears noises of the camp the next morning. More snow fell during the night, and Buck is now completely covered. He doesn't remember where he is. He feels trapped. He is frightened. He springs out of the sleeping hole into the sunlight, barking frantically. The snow flies around him in a cloud. Then he sees the tents and hears Francois's voice. Now he remembers that he's in the camp. The men watch him.
That Buck, he learned fast,
says Francois. Perrault has important messages from the government to deliver in the north. He must put together a good dog sled team. He is very happy that he has Buck. Buck is a strong, clever dog, and he learns quickly. 3 more huskies come to join the team too. The men harness all the dogs to the sleds. Soon they are on the trail to Dyer Canyon. Buck is happy to leave the camp at last. The work is hard, but he likes it. He likes to be part of this strong team. Even Dave and Solex seem like different dogs when they work. They are more active and alert. The dogs are content working together. The trip to Dyer Canyon is long and difficult. They run through forests, across glaciers, through snowdrifts and over frozen lakes. They make good time, traveling 40 miles a day. That night, they pull into a huge camp at Lake Bennett. Thousands of gold miners live in this camp. They build boats for the summer here. Buck makes his hole in the snow and sleeps very well that night. He is very, very tired. The next day, and for many days, the trails are harder and they must travel slower. Perrault often has to walk in front of the sled to beat a path for the dogs in the snow. He knows a lot about ice and snow. He knows where the ice is too thin for the sled and where the snow is too deep. Perrault's knowledge saves them many times. When it gets dark, they make camp, and when the sun rises in the morning, they are up and ready to travel again. It is a wild, primitive life. The dogs eat fish and sleep in the snow. Buck is always hungry. Francois gives him 1.5 pounds of salmon a day, but it is never enough. The work and the cold make him hungrier still. But Buck is lucky. The other dogs are smaller and thinner than him, and Francois only gives them 1 pound of salmon each. At first, Buck eats his food politely, like he ate in the Southland, and often other, quicker dogs steal his dinner from under his nose. He chases the thieves to fight them, but while he is fighting, others steal the food from them. But soon Buck learns to be smarter. He eats as fast as the other dogs and learns to defend his food. He watches and waits, and understands something new about this strange, harsh life every day. One day, he sees Pike, a new dog, stealing a slice of bacon from Perrault. Buck tries the same thing the next day. He is very quick and gets a whole chunk of bacon. After this, Buck plays the same trick on Perrault many times, but he never gets caught. Dub, another new dog, tries it too, but he is not as quick as Buck. Dub always gets caught, and Perrault hits him with his stick. Gradually, Buck learns to survive in these harsh, new conditions. He learns how to live with the terrible cold, how to steal extra food when he is hungry. He learns never to run away from a fight, but to show the other dogs he is not afraid. He learns how to work with his companions in the dog sled team. This is the Northland, and here it is the law of the stick and the fang that rules them all.
Chapter 5. Bookk fights hungry wolves.
Bookk becomes stronger and stronger. His muscles are as hard as iron. He doesn't feel pain anymore. He can see and smell very well, and his hearing is acute. He learns to bite the ice out from between his toes when his feet freeze on the trail. He knows how to make water holes in thin ice. He breaks the ice with his stiff front legs and drinks. His natural instincts come out in this vast wilderness, and he becomes strong and smart, a true Northland dog. He is a great survivor. He is also learning to be a great fighter. He doesn't start fights. In fact, he tries to avoid them. But Spitz is his enemy, and Spitz wants to fight all the time. The team moves on farther north. They make camp at Lake Le Barge. It is very, very cold there. The wind is fierce and cuts like a knife. It gets dark very early, and they have to make camp quickly. There is a wall of rock near the lake shore, and they camp under it, on the frozen lake surface. Francois and Perrault build a fire and lay their sleeping bags on the ice. Bookk digs his sleeping hole near a large rock that protects him from the cold. They eat in the dark. Bookk does not want to leave his warm sleeping hole to eat, but he is very hungry, and so he comes out to eat his fish. When he goes back to the hole, he finds Spitz in it. He knows it's time to teach Spitz a lesson. He springs on him, and they bite and tear each other with their fangs. Francois runs over to the fighting dogs.
Ah, give it to him, Bookk! Give it to him!
He cries. Both Spitz and Bookk circle, showing their teeth. Perrault and Francois move in, ready to stop the fight. All eyes are on Bookk and Spitz. No one notices that in the shadows, far from the fire, a pack of starving wolves is slowly approaching the camp. They look like huskies, but they are not. They are wild animals, and they are crazy with hunger. They smell food in the camp. They move steadily towards the food box. Perrault turns round and sees a wolf with its head inside the box. He throws his stick at it, but it misses the wolf and hits the food box, which breaks into pieces. The other wolves run to the food which spills out and start to gulp it down. They feel Perrault's stick on their backs, but they are so hungry they don't care. They continue to eat ravenously. The team dogs come out of their sleeping holes to watch the wolves. They are very thin. Their bones show through their skin, and they are mad with hunger. The team dogs know they cannot fight these savage animals, but they growl at them menacingly. Suddenly, the wolves turn on the team dogs. 3 of them attack Bookk. They tear and rip his shoulder, snarling and growling furiously. The scene is terrifying. Billy is crying in terror. Dave and Sol-Lex are bleeding from many bites, but Joe bares his teeth like a devil and springs in to attack. He bites one of the wolves right to the bone and breaks its leg. Then Pike leaps upon the wounded wolf and breaks its neck. Bookk bites through the neck of one wolf and Spitz wounds another. The scene is barbaric and bloody. Perrault and Francois want to save their team dogs, but they know they also have to save the rest of their food if they want to survive on the trail. They cannot help. Dave is frightened and runs away across the ice. Pike and Dub soon follow him. The other team dogs run after them too. Later, the 9 dogs gather together in the forest. All of them are wounded in many places. Dub has a bad wound on his left leg. Dolly, the last dog to join the team, is bleeding at the throat. One of Joe's eyes is gone, and Billy has a torn ear. When the sun rises, they walk back slowly to the camp. The hungry wolves are gone, and with them, half of the team's food supply.
Chapter 6. Bookk and Spitz fight to the end.
Francois looks at his wounded dogs in the cold sunlight.
Ah, my friends,
He says softly.
you are still here, but maybe later you will go crazy from the wolves' bites.
Perrault is very worried. They still have 400 miles to go to Dawson. If the dogs go crazy, they can't get there. The men put on the harnesses and the team starts on its way. This trail is the most difficult one they have traveled so far. After a few days, they come to the 30-mile river. It is very wide, and the wild water is cold and swift. They take 6 days to travel only 30 miles. Perrault still goes in front of the team to beat a path. The ice breaks under them many times, and Perrault has to use a long pole to pull himself out of the freezing water. The temperature is 50 degrees below zero. Each time Perrault falls through the ice, the team must stop for a long time. He must build a fire to dry his clothes and to warm himself before they can go on again. Perrault is strong and brave. He takes many risks, but he doesn't get frightened easily. One time, when he falls through the ice, Dave and Bookk fall through behind him. They nearly die in the icy water. Perrault builds a fire to thaw the thick ice which forms on the dog's fur. Francois and Perrault make the two dogs run round and around the fire to get warm again. On another day, the ice on the river breaks and the sled can't run over it. They have to go up the side of the canyon and over the cliffs. It takes a long time and is very tiring for the dogs. These 30 miles are extremely dangerous. They are all exhausted when they finally arrive at Hootalinqua and find solid ice again. Bookk is very tired. The other dogs are in better condition, but they have more experience on the trial than Bookk. Perrault pushes them to go faster. They work from morning until night with very little rest. Book's feet are not as hard as the feet of huskies. He begins to limp from the ice and cold. Francois rubs Book's poor feet every night. He also makes him little dog moccasins to protect his sore feet. This makes Bookk feel much better. Dolly, the dog that the wolves bit in the throat at Lake Le Barge, begins to act strangely. She howls long and loud like the wild wolves who attacked her. She runs backwards and forwards. The other dogs are frightened. She turns on Bookk and attacks him, but he doesn't want to fight her. He runs into the forest. Dolly follows him closely. Francois tells Bookk to turn back to the camp. He takes a stick and hits Dolly hard as she passes him. The blow hits her on the head, and she dies instantly. Suddenly, Spitz takes advantage of the confusion to attack Bookk. Francois beats Spitz with his whip.
Spitz is a devil,
He says to Perrault.
he want to kill Bookk.
Bookk is a strong dog. Spitz cannot beat him, you will see.
Replies Perrault. Now there is open war between Spitz and Bookk. Spitz thinks that Bookk wants to take his position as the leader of the team. He wants to fight Bookk to the death. Bookk knows now that he must fight Spitz. It is the only solution. He is not afraid. He begins to challenge Spitz more and more. One day, Spitz is going around the camp looking for trouble. He finds Dave sleeping under snow, digs him out, and starts to fight with him. Bookk tries to save Dave. He springs at Spitz and knocks him off his feet. Francois hits Bookk with his whip to separate the two enemies. He does not want any of the dogs to die in the fight. Spitz and Bookk back off, but they are now fierce enemies. At last, they arrive at Dawson. Dawson is a busy mining town, and both men and dogs work very hard here, pulling logs and firewood up to the gold mines. Bookk meets many dogs. Some are from the Southland like him, but most of the dogs are huskies. The team leaves after resting for a week in Dawson. They travel far up north on the Yukon trail. One day, Dave finds a snow rabbit on the trail. The rabbit escapes, but all of the dogs in the team run after it. They are near another camp. 50 dogs from that camp hear the noise and join the chase through the forest. Bookk is leading the enormous pack of dogs, but they cannot catch the rabbit. It's too fast for them. Suddenly, Spitz leaves the pack and runs down another path. He circles the pack and rushes out in front of them, snarling at Bookk. Bookk knows now that they have to fight, and one of them will die today. They circle each other, Their fangs drip with saliva. Their ears lie flat against their heads. They arch their backs, snarling. Buck tries to bite Spitz in the throat. Spitz defends himself with his fangs. He rips Buck's shoulder with his teeth. Buck is bleeding, and he is tired. Spitz rushes at Buck again. Buck rolls over, but he doesn't go down. All the dogs circle the two fighting dogs, yelping with excitement. Buck knows he mustn't lose. If he loses, he is dead. He leaps at Spitz and crushes his front leg with his enormous teeth. Spitz squeals in agony. He is helpless now. Buck kills him quickly. The pack closes in and surrounds the dead dog.
Chapter 7. Buck becomes the master dog.
The next morning, Francois finds that Spitz is gone. Buck has many wounds,
That Spitz is a real fighter.
says Perrault.
Yes, but Buck is the strongest of all the dogs. He fights like two big huskies.
Says Francois.
Come on, Perrault. We must go on. We still have a lot of miles to travel. No more Spitz, no more trouble.
Francois packs the sled and harnesses the dogs. Buck goes quietly into Spitz's old place at the front of the team. Francois doesn't see him and leads Solex to Spitz's position. He believes Solex is the most experienced dog to take over as leader. Buck is angry and springs on Solex, snarling fiercely.
What's this?
Laughs Francois.
Look at Buck. First he kills Spitz and now he takes his job. Go away, Buck.
But Buck doesn't move. Eventually, Francois has to pull him away. Solex goes back to the lead position. Buck growls angrily and runs over to chase him away. Now Francois is really angry.
I fix you now, Buck.
He cries. He picks up a heavy stick. Buck remembers the red sweater man. He remembers the law of the stick. He starts to retreat slowly. Solex goes to the lead position again, and this time Buck doesn't try to chase him away. He only snarls and growls. Francois calls Buck to go to the position in front of Dave. Buck retreats 1 or 2 steps, and Francois follows him. Every time Francois approaches Buck, he retreats. They play this game for a long time. Then Francois, exasperated, throws the stick at Buck. But Buck isn't afraid of the stick. He wants to be the leader. Perrault and Francois chase Buck for more than an hour. They throw sticks at him. He dodges the sticks. They swear at him. He snarls and growls. He doesn't try to run away, but he makes Francois and Perrault understand that he wants to be the leader. If he isn't the leader, he won't pull with the other dogs. Perrault looks at his wristwatch. He isn't happy that they are wasting so much time with Buck's game. They have to get on the trail. The two men decide to give in. Buck can be the leader. They take Solex from the lead position and call to Buck.
Hey,
Oh, come here.
Buck
Oh,
laughs as
Buck,
dogs
here.
laugh, with his
Here,
mouth
Buck,
open,
here,
but he
Buck,
doesn't
here.
come.
Here, Buck.
Francois takes off Solex's harness and puts him back in his old position in front of the sled. The dog team is harnessed to the sled, ready to start on the trail. The lead position is empty. Francois calls Buck again. Again. Buck laughs and doesn't come. Perrault watches the scene for a while. Then he says,
Throw down your stick.
Francois throws it down. Buck watches him, then trots into the lead position, wagging his tail. They put on his harness, and the dogs begin to pull the sled. They are on the trail again. Buck is a good leader. He is smart and quick. He wants to show the men that he is a better leader than Spitz. Dave and Solex are happy that Buck is their leader. They are work dogs, and they are used to working hard. The rest of the dog team is restless because of the change of leader. They are difficult to manage, but Buck must make them behave. Pike is in the position behind Buck. He likes to go slowly, and Buck doesn't like this. He makes Pike pull very hard. He also has to punish Joe the first night. Joe is a mean dog. He pulls in the position next to Pike and bites him whenever he can. Buck sees Joe trying to bite Pike and springs on him. He bites him hard, and Joe cries in pain. The dogs begin to understand that Buck is their leader now, and they must obey him. After a few days, the dog team is happier, and the dogs are working well with each other. Francois and Perrault buy 2 more dogs at Rink Rapids. They are called Teak and Kuna. Bookk teaches them how to be good sled dogs.
Bookk is a great dog,
Says Francois.
He is worth $1,000, don't you think, Perrault?
Perrault agrees.
That Bookk, he's the best dog that ever pulled a sled on the Northland Trail.
He says,
He's the smartest and quickest sled dog we ever had. Book's the master of all the dogs.
Chapter 8. The dog sled team has new owners.
Bookk is an excellent leader. The dog sled team makes good time now. The temperature is 50 degrees below zero, and they don't stop very often. They make long runs each day to keep the dogs moving in the freezing cold. Each day for 2 weeks, the team travels 40 miles a day. Perrault and Francois stop for 3 days' rest in Skagway to drink with their friends there. The dogs are very popular. Many people stop to look at them. Francois decides to sell the dog sled team to a Scottish man who offers him a lot of money. When he takes the team to the man the next day, he is very unhappy. He throws his arms around Bookk and cries. Bookk never sees Francois or Perrault again. Now Bookk must work with new dogs. They go back down the trail to Dawson. Bookk works very hard. He is in the mail service on the busiest route. The dogs carry a very heavy load. They carry many letters from all over the world to the men who are looking for gold in the Northland. Bookk does not like this work, but he does it well. He is proud of his work as the team leader, but every day is the same, hard and long. Each morning, the cooks in the huge camp build fires and cook breakfast. Other men harness the dogs. The team then moves down the trail until it gets dark. At night, they make camp again. Some men build fires. Some cut wood. Others carry water or ice for the cooks. The dogs are fed. And so it goes on. The routine is always the same. Bookk and the other dogs look forward to dinner time. They eat their fish, and then they can relax. Some dogs in the camp are fighters. Bookk has fierce battles with some of these dogs, but he wins them all, and soon becomes master of all the sled dogs in this camp too. Bookk likes to lie stretched out near the fire. He dreams of his past life. Sometimes he thinks of Judge Miller's big house in California. He remembers the other dogs there, Isabel and Toots, and the warm, sunny days. More often, however, Bookk remembers the man in the red sweater, and poor Curly, and his fight to the death with Spitz. Sometimes Bookk dreams strange dreams of another fire with another man sitting by it in another time. This man is hairy and short, but very strong. His hair is long and matted. He speaks a strange language. He is afraid of the dark. This man doesn't have any clothes. He wears animal skins. It is a strange dream. Bookk doesn't understand it at all. The dog sled team works hard carrying the heavy mail. The dogs are very weak when they reach Dawson. They need a good long rest. But instead, the men move them on down the trail only 2 days later. The dogs are very tired. They go slowly, and the men grumble. It snows every day, which makes the dogs work much harder. The trail is soft, and it is hard to pull the sled in the soft new snow. The men treat the dogs well. They know that without them they can't survive. The dogs eat before the men. The men check the dogs' feet before they go to sleep, rubbing them if they are sore. Still, the dogs and the men become very tired on the difficult Yukon trail. During the entire winter, they traveled 1,800 miles, pulling sleds all the way. Bookk keeps strict discipline in the team. The dogs all have different personalities and different problems. Often, Billy cries in his sleep. He is very tired. He doesn't want to pull the sled anymore. Joe becomes meaner each day, and Sollex doesn't want any other dogs near him. But it is Dave who suffers the most. He becomes very ill. Something is wrong inside him. When they get to Cassiar Bar, he is very sick indeed. He falls down many times in his harness. The men take him off the team and put Sollex in his place, but Dave doesn't like this. He growls and cries. He wants to pull, even if he is sick. He is proud and doesn't want another dog to do his work. He runs next to the sled and bites Sol-leks when he can. The Scottish man has to use the whip to keep Dave away from Sol-leks, but Dave doesn't care. Finally, he falls on the trial, and this time he can't get up. The men see him fall and go to him. He looks up at the men with sad eyes. They know he is going to die. He raises himself very slowly and painfully. The men understand what he wants. If he is going to die, then he wants to die on the trail. They put the harness on him and lead him to his old position. He pulls the sled proudly, although he is crying in pain. He pulls the sled until evening. That night in the camp, the driver makes room for him by the fire. In the morning, Dave is so weak that he can't even crawl to the sled. He lies in the snow and cries. The other dogs pull the sled away without him. A few minutes later, they hear a gunshot. They stop. Bookk knows, all the dogs know, that Dave is dead.
Chapter 9. Bookk gets new owners again.
It takes them 30 days to get back to Skagway. They are all very, very tired. Bookk used to weigh 63 kilos. Now he weighs only 52 kilos. Many of the other dogs are much thinner than Bookk, and they are all in poor condition. Pike's front leg is hurt and he is limping. Sol-leks is limping too. Dub's shoulder is hurt. All of the dogs have very sore feet, little energy, and no spirit left to work. They are exhausted from the many weeks of pulling the sled. Every muscle aches, every bone aches too. In 5 months, they have traveled an incredible 2,500 miles. The dogs and the drivers expect a long rest at Skagway, but the government mail service has other ideas. It is a large, busy town, and a lot of miners live there, all of them with sweethearts, wives, and relatives back home. The amount of mail in Skagway is enormous. There are official orders to deliver this mail as soon as possible. The mail carriers need dogs to take the sleds with the mail down the trail, but Book's team is too tired. They aren't strong enough now. Fresh dogs from Hudson Bay replace Book's team. 3 days pass. Bookk and the others are still very weak. After another 4 days, 2 Americans buy the team and the harness for a very low price. Bookk sees them give the Scottish man money, and then the mail carriers are no longer part of his life. They are gone, just like Judge Miller, Francois, and Perrault, and the man in the red sweater. These men are called Hal and Charles. Charles is middle-aged, with light, watery eyes. He has a long, thick moustache. Hal is about 20 years old. He carries a Colt revolver and a hunting knife. Bookk feels that these men are not like the other men in the Northland. Somehow they are different. The new owner's tent is not very nice. It is dirty and disorganized. There is also a woman there. Her name is Mercedes. She is Charles's wife and Hal's sister. Bookk watches them take down the tent and load the sled. They are not good at this. The tent is not folded properly. The tin dishes are packed but not washed. Mercedes talks all the time and gives advice to the 2 men. None of them knows how to pack a sled. The men put the things on the front, and Mercedes tells them to put them on the back. Nothing is organized. The sled looks a mess. 3 men come out of the saloon and laugh at the sled.
Your load is too heavy,
says one man.
It's not my business, but I don't think you should take that tent.
Mercedes cries.
No, I need to have a tent.
It's spring now, ma'am.
Replies the man.
The weather isn't too cold. It's warm enough to sleep under the stars.
Mercedes shakes her head.
No.
She repeats. Hal and Charles put the tent onto the sled with all their other equipment.
Do you think your sled will ride?
Asks one of the men.
Yes.
Says Charles coldly. He does not like this man or his questions.
Oh,
replies the man.
it seems a bit heavy to me.
The sled is very heavy. Bookk looks at the sled. He knows it is going to be hard to move. Charles tightens the straps that hold the equipment on the sled. He harnesses the dogs. They are ready to go. Hal grabs his whip and swings it at the dog.
Mush!
He shouts.
Mush, mush!
Chapter 10. The Whip of the New Owners.
The dogs work hard to move the sled, but they can't. It's too heavy,
Lazy brutes!
shouts Hal and begins to whip the dogs. Mercedes cries.
Oh, Hal, don't hit the dogs.
She grabs the whip from Hal.
You must promise not to hurt the dogs. I won't go if you hurt them.
You don't know anything about dogs.
Her brother says.
These dogs are lazy. You have to whip them to make them move. That is a dog's way. Ask anyone. Ask those men over there.
Mercedes looks at the men. She is sad for the dogs. One of the men says,
The dogs are very weak. They're still tired from their last trip. They need a long rest.
Rest? Ha!
says Hal. Mercedes cries for the dogs, but she loves her brother and she is proud. She says to Hal,
Never mind that man. You are the driver of this sled. You do your best.
Hal takes the whip and hits the dogs. The dogs try hard to pull the sled. They dig their feet into the packed snow. They pull with all their strength. The sled is stuck like an anchor. It won't move. The dogs stand still and pant. Hal continues to hit the dogs with the whip. Mercedes is crying. She goes to Bookk and puts her arms around his neck.
You poor animals.
She cries.
Why won't you pull the sled? Hal whips you when you don't pull. Please, please pull the sled.
Bookk does not like Mercedes. He is tired and angry. One of the other men speaks up.
You must help the dogs. The runners of that sled are frozen to the snow. Break the runners free.
Hal loosens the runners. The dogs try another time. The sled moves forward. Bookk and his team struggle with the sled. They feel the whip on their backs. They go 100 yards to the main street. There is a sharp corner. Hal is not an experienced sled driver. As they turn the corner, the sled begins to lean over and all the equipment falls off into the snow. But the dogs don't stop. They are angry at Hal's treatment and they don't like the whip. Bookk is furious. He starts to run and the rest of the team follow him. Hal cries,
Whoa, whoa!
but the dogs won't stop. He tries to run after them, but the sled trips him up and he falls in the snow. The dogs run on through the center of Skagway, pulling the empty sled behind them. Eventually, some kind citizens of Skagway catch the dogs. Others gather up the equipment from the street. They tell Charles and Hal they must lighten the sled's load. They also tell them to get more dogs for the team. Hal and Charles listen, but they are stubborn men. They put the tent on again and begin to repack the sled. They take out the canned food. The Northland men laugh when they see the cans. They are much too heavy to take on the trail. Canned food is only for kings in the Northland. One citizen tells them,
Take out all your canned food and throw away that tent. Throw away your dishes, too. Who is going to wash them? Do you think you're going to a hotel? The sled won't ride with all that weight.
Hal and Charles take many of these things off the sled. Mercedes cries when they take off her bag of clothes. She is angry. She takes Hal and Charles's clothes off as well. Hal and Charles buy 6 new outside dogs. The outside dogs are not experienced at pulling a sled. One dog is a Newfoundland, then there are 3 short-haired pointers and 2 mongrels. They are big dogs, but they are not like huskies who are born to pull. Now there are 14 dogs in the team.
Chapter 11. Tragedy on the Trail.
Bookk tries to teach the outside dogs to pull, but they don't learn easily. They don't like the harness or the snow, and they have no spirit. They also don't like Hal's harsh treatment of them. Bookk knows that his old teammates are doing most of the work. They are all too tired to be excited about going on the trail again. His new owners don't know anything about pulling sleds or traveling the trail. They are lazy and can't even pitch a tent. They don't make good time. Some days the team doesn't even travel 10 miles. The food the men brought for the dogs is not enough for the whole trip. They give them smaller rations each day. The dogs are tired and hungry and depressed. Hal wakes one morning to find there is no food left for the dogs. He tries to make them go further, but they are too weak. Dub dies first. He is terribly hungry and steals food from the men. Hal punishes him with the whip. After this, Dub's shoulder becomes so weak that he can't pull. Hal shoots him with his revolver. The outside dogs suffer the most because they need lots of food. They can't live on a husky's ration. The Newfoundland dog dies from hunger and exhaustion, then the 3 pointers, and finally the 2 mongrels. Charles, Hal, and Mercedes are tired and afraid. They imagined the Northland was a glamorous, romantic place, but it is not. It is harsh and primitive and unforgiving. They are tired and afraid. They become very short-tempered and argue a lot. They feel so sorry for themselves that they don't think of the dogs at all. When Hal is angry with his companions, he beats the dogs with a stick. At 5 Fingers, an Indian offers to give them some horse meat for the dogs to eat in exchange for Hal's revolver. It is not good meat. It's as hard as leather. They eat it, but the dogs are still hungry. Bookk tries hard to pull the sled, but he is so weak that he often falls. Hal whips him and beats him with the stick, and Bookk gets up and pulls again. He is not a healthy dog now. His fur is stiff and dull and matted with blood. His muscles are gone. He is very, very thin. There are only 7 dogs left, and all of them look like skeletons. They are miserable and tired. They have no spirit. When the sled stops, the dogs fall where they stand. They can't move. Hal brings out the whip and hits them until eventually they rise painfully and stagger forwards once more. One day, Billy falls down and can't get up again. Hal doesn't have his revolver anymore, so he takes an axe and hits Billy on the head. Billy dies immediately. Hal takes Billy's body and throws it to one side of the trail. Bookk and his teammates watch in fear. They know Hal may do the same to them too. The next day, Kuna dies. Now there are only 5 dogs left. The spring is coming, and the cold winter snows are melting, but the miserable little group doesn't even notice. Flowers are appearing everywhere, and animals are coming out from their winter homes. Squirrels chatter, birds sing. The days are getting longer and the air is sweet. They arrive at a camp on the White River. It is John Thornton's camp. John Thornton sits on a log and watches them coming. Mercedes sits down near John Thornton and immediately begins to cry. Charles slowly sits down too. The dogs drop in their tracks. Everyone is exhausted. Hal begins to speak. John Thornton listens in silence.
We need to stop here. The trail is thawing, the ice is melting. It's too dangerous to go on,
he says. John Thornton does not reply.
Many people said that it was impossible to get to White River at this time of year.
He continues proudly.
But here we are.
Their advice was right, boy,
replies Thornton quietly.
The trail is dangerous. Only fools travel this far. There is nothing here, and there isn't enough gold in Alaska to make me travel any further.
Hal is angry.
Well, then we'll have to go back to Dawson again,
he says defiantly. He stands up and takes his whip.
Get up, Bookk! Hey, get up! Whoosh, whoosh!
The team of dogs can't get up. Hal whips the dogs furiously. Thornton watches him, his face like stone. Solex struggles to his feet. Teak follows. Joe gets up next, crying with pain. Pike tries to rise. He falls twice, then lies still on the snow. Buck doesn't try to get up. Hal whips him many times, but he doesn't get up. Hal gets a big stick and beats him, but he doesn't get up. Thornton can stand no more. He springs at Hal and knocks him to the ground. Mercedes screams.
If you strike that dog again,
Shouts John Thornton, shaking with anger.
I will kill you.
It's my dog!
Replies Hal, wiping the blood from his mouth.
Get out of my way!
Thornton cuts Buck free from the harness. Hal tells Charles and Mercedes to harness the other 4 dogs and turn them around. They stagger away, back down the trail, the poor dogs whimpering in pain. John Thornton feels Buck for broken bones, but there aren't any. He watches the sled go slowly down the trail. After a few minutes, Buck hears Mercedes scream. The ice on the trail is melting, and it can't support the heavy sled anymore. All of them, humans and dogs, fall through into the icy water below. They are never seen again. Only Buck is safe with his new master.
Chapter 12. For the Love of a Man.
John Thornton is a kind man. He lets Buck rest for many days. Gradually, Buck's wounds heal, his muscles get stronger, and he gets fatter. Thornton has 2 other dogs. Skeet is a little Irish setter who takes care of Buck. Nig is a huge, black, friendly dog. Thornton's dogs like Buck a lot. They are not jealous of him. As Buck gets better, the dogs play many games together. For the first time since he came to the Northland, Buck feels truly happy. Thornton is a good master. Many men think dogs are working machines, but Thornton treats them like his children. He talks to them, he strokes them, he takes them for long walks in the forest. Buck loves to feel Thornton's hand on his back. He loves his new master. He lies next to him for hours, looking at his face. He studies his emotions and moods. He follows him everywhere. He doesn't want Thornton to pass out of his life like all his other masters. He adores him.
Buck,
says Thornton, smiling.
you are almost human.
But this domestic life is hard for Buck. He is a primitive dog now, a dog of the Northland, rugged, strong, and wild. His face is covered in scars. He is a fighter and has won many battles. Skeet and Nig never fight. They are dogs of the Southland, gentle and civilized. Buck sits quietly next to Thornton. He thinks about this comfortable life he has now, and he remembers the past. He remembers the fights with dogs and wolves and the hard work of the trails. Often he hears the wild wolves calling far away in the wilderness. He wants to run to them. It is in his nature. Instead, he stretches out by the fire near John Thornton and dreams. Buck obeys his master in everything. One day, Thornton and his friends Pete and Hans are sitting on a high mountain ledge. Thornton jokes,
Jump, Buck! Go on, jump!
The ledge is more than 300 feet high, but Buck jumps because his master tells him to. Thornton grabs him just in time and pulls him to safety.
Phew, that is a very loyal dog.
Says Pete.
Buck's loyalty is frightening.
Replies Thornton.
It's splendid, but it's frightening too.
Anyone who tries to hurt you will be in big trouble.
Jokes Pete.
Buck's teeth are very sharp.
One day, a man does try to hurt John Thornton. Black Burton picks a fight with Buck's master in a bar in the town. He hits Thornton, and he falls down. Buck is watching and begins to growl furiously. He springs on Burton and tears at his throat. Burton falls on the ground, blood pouring from his neck. He screams in terror. Someone in the crowd grabs Buck and pulls him off Burton. Everyone is shouting and crying. Later, the miners of the town have a meeting. They decide that Burton started the fight, and they give Buck back to his master. But now, everyone knows what a fierce, loyal dog Buck is. Soon he is famous all over Alaska. Later in the year, Bookk saves Thornton's life again. Hans, Pete and Thornton are canoeing down 40 Mile Creek. Hans and Pete go ashore, but Thornton stays in the canoe. Bookk is on the shore. He is worried for his master. Suddenly, the strong current tips the little canoe over and carries Thornton away downstream. The water is wild here. No one can swim against this current. Bookk jumps into the water and swims after his master. The furious water pushes him back, but he keeps going on. He grabs Thornton's clothes with his teeth. He uses his great strength to slowly swim with Thornton in the wild water towards the shore. But the current is too strong even for Bookk, and Thornton's body hits the rocks. Thornton knows that they can't get to the shore. He grabs onto a slippery rock.
Go, Bookk, go!
Shouts Thornton. Bookk hears the command and swims towards the shore. Pete and Hans pull him out of the water. Then they run down the shore to help Thornton. They know that Thornton can only hold onto the slippery rock for a short time. They throw him a rope. They attach the other end of the rope to Book's shoulders. He pulls very hard, like he used to pull the sled. Slowly, he pulls Thornton to the shore. He is very weak, but he grabs Bookk around the neck and hugs him fiercely. Some of Book's bones are broken after this terrible adventure, and he is very sick for many days. But his great love for Thornton gives him the will to survive and saves his life.
Chapter 13. Thornton wins a bet.
That winter, another thing happens which makes Bookk famous all over the Northland. John Thornton is at the El Dorado Saloon. The men there are boasting about their favorite dogs. They are trying to find a dog that is better than Bookk, but Thornton always defends his dog. One man says that his dog can pull 220 kilos. Another man boasts that his dog can pull 270 kilos. A third man says that his dog can pull 320 kilos.
Pooh,
Says John Thornton.
that's nothing. Bookk can pull 450.
Oh, yeah?
Says Matthewson, the man who says his dog can pull 320 kilos.
And can he pull that load for 100 meters?
Sure he can.
Replies Thornton proudly.
Well,
Says Matthewson loudly. He wants everyone to hear him.
I have $1,000 here. I say that your dog can't pull 450 kilos.
He slams a sack of gold the size of a salami on the bar counter.
I have a sled outside with 25 kilo sacks of flour loaded on it.
Continues Matthewson.
Let's go and see.
No one speaks for a moment. Thornton feels a bit worried. He isn't really sure that Bookk can pull this weight. 450 kilos. He knows that Bookk is strong, but now he has to bet money on his hasty words. All the men are looking at Thornton, waiting for him to speak. He doesn't have $1,000, nor do Hans or Pete. He looks from face to face. He doesn't know what to say. Then he sees Jim O'Brien, his old friend.
Do you have $1,000?
He whispers to him.
Sure, my friend.
Says O'Brien. He puts his sack of gold next to Matthewson's.
I don't know if Bookk can do this, but I sure hope he can.
Says O'Brien to Thornton. Everyone in the bar goes outside to watch Bookk pull the sled. Other people come to watch too. There are several hundred people in the street. Many of them put bets on Bookk. Some think he can pull the sled, others don't. The weather is very cold, about 60 degrees below zero. The sled's runners are frozen to the ground. Thornton breaks the runners free from the ice. He looks at the sled. He thinks to himself,
I don't think that Bookk can do this.
Matthewson sees the situation is getting worse for Thornton.
I want to bet another $1,000.
He shouts defiantly. Thornton is very nervous, but he has a fighting spirit. He calls Hans and Pete to him. They have only $200 together, but they put the money next to Matthewson's. Bookk is harnessed to the sled. He knows that he must do a great thing for his master. Everyone talks about how good Bookk looks. His coat is shiny and healthy. His muscles are strong.
Get, sir. Gad, sir.
says one man.
I'll pay $800 for your dog.
Thornton shakes his head and walks to Buck's side. The crowd becomes silent. He talks to him quietly.
As you love me, Buck. As you love me.
He whispers. As Thornton gets to his feet, Buck grabs his mitten between his teeth, looks up into his eyes, and then slowly releases it. This is Buck's answer. He cannot speak, but he can still show his great love. Thornton steps back.
Now, Buck!
He shouts. Buck tightens the harness and swings to the right. The sled moves slightly. Buck swings to the left. The sled moves more. The men in the crowd hold their breath.
Now! Mush!
Shouts Thornton. Buck throws all his weight forward. He uses all his strength to pull the sled. His chest is low over the ground. He begins to move the sled inch by inch. Soon the sled is moving faster. Then Buck is pulling it very slowly but smoothly. Thornton runs behind and encourages his dog. Buck pulls and pulls. The men cheer louder and louder. Soon the crowd shouts with happiness. Buck is past the 100-meter mark. The people in the crowd throw their hats and mittens into the air. Thornton falls on his knees beside Buck. He grabs his head and hugs him.
Gad, sir! Gad, sir!
Says the man.
I'll give you $1,000 for this dog.
Thornton rises to his feet. His eyes are wet with tears.
No, sir.
He says.
He's not for sale. He is my dog forever.
Buck looks at Thornton and bites his mitten again. They are best friends.
Chapter 14. The Sound of the Call.
Thornton, Hans, and Pete decide to try and find the lost gold mine. The legend about this mine is very old. It says many men look for it, few find it, and more die trying to find it. Near the mine, they say, there is also an ancient cabin called the Lost Cabin. The story says that there is a lot of gold there, but that no ordinary man can take it. Thornton, Hans, Pete, Buck, and a team of dogs go to find this place. They travel 70 miles up the Yukon Trail. Thornton is not afraid of the wilderness, and Buck loves this life. For weeks, the team travels through the harsh Northland. 2 months pass. They travel through places that few men ever see. In the autumn, they come to a strange, unknown country full of lakes. It is sad and silent, with few signs of life. They travel on through the winter. Finally, at the end of the winter, they find a cabin in a very remote place. They go inside, but all they find are old, rotten blankets, some broken furniture, and a gun. The spring comes and still they don't find the lost cabin. But one day they do find a stream in a valley with a lot of gold in it. They decide to stay there, and each day the men pan for gold. They find big nuggets of gold and gold dust in the clear mountain water. There are thousands of dollars in the stream. The men fill many sacks with gold. Each sack contains 20 kilos. The dogs have nothing to do while the men work. Sometimes they pull the meat that Thornton kills in the forest back to camp. Buck spends many hours by the fire. He often dreams about the short, hairy man. He sees this man sleeping by the fire, his hands behind his head. He runs beside the hairy man. They hunt together, they fish together. Buck feels at home in this strange dreamland. During this time, Buck also hears the call of the wild. He hears it in his blood. Sometimes he runs into the forest to find it. He thinks it is something real. He thinks he can see it. He puts his nose into the cool moss or the black soil. He sometimes stays there quietly for a long time. He hopes he can find this call, this strange sensation from the wilderness that stirs his senses and makes him want to run and run and run. Sometimes, When he is sleeping in the warm sun, he suddenly lifts his head and his ears prick up. He jumps up and goes running into the forest. He runs through the trees and across the open spaces. He runs by the rivers and streams. He likes to watch the birds and animals that live there. Sometimes he spends all day just watching partridges. One night, Bookk hears a noise as he sleeps. It is a long, low howl. He doesn't recognize this sound. No dog makes it. But something inside of him stirs. Bookk springs to his feet and runs into the dark, silent forest. He comes closer to the sound. He moves more slowly, cautiously. Soon he comes to an open space. A long, thin timber wolf is standing there, its nose pointing to the sky. Bookk makes no noise, but the wolf stops howling and stands very still. It knows he is there. It runs away when it sees Bookk, but he follows it. The wolf turns and snarls at Bookk. It shows its teeth and snaps at him. But Bookk does not attack. He circles around the wolf. He tries to be friendly, but the wolf is suspicious and afraid. Then the wolf sees an opening in the trees and runs. Bookk chases him for a long time. In the end, the wolf understands that Bookk is not an enemy. They touch their noses together. They become friends and play. The wolf runs in front of Bookk. He wants Bookk to follow him. They run side by side through the forest. Bookk knows this is the call. He knows this is freedom. He knows this is the life he was born to. Bookk and the wolf stop by a stream to drink. Then Bookk remembers John Thornton. He sits down. The wolf begins to run again, but Bookk doesn't move. The wolf comes back. He wants Bookk to follow him, but he can't. He gets up and starts back to the camp. The wolf runs with him for an hour. It doesn't understand. Bookk goes on back to the camp. Then the wolf sits, raises its nose to the sky, and begins to howl sadly. Bookk keeps going towards the camp. Soon, he hears only a faint howl in the distance. Then, nothing.
Chapter 15. Bookk returns to the wild.
When Bookk comes back into the camp, John Thornton is eating his dinner. Bookk jumps on him. He licks his face and bites his hands. Bookk doesn't leave the camp for 2 days. He is always at Thornton's side, but he remembers his wild brother. He returns to the forest when he can, but the wolf is not there. Bookk begins to sleep outside at night. He stays away from the camp for many days. He continues to look for the wolf. In the forest, his natural instincts come alive. One day, he kills an animal for meat. He returns 2 days later and sees a dozen wolverines finishing his meat. He chases them away. He becomes a hunter, killing for meat, fishing for salmon in the streams. One day, he even kills a large black bear. He is a predator. He looks for prey. He lives alone in this harsh environment, and he is proud because he knows only the strongest animals can survive here. He is proud, too, of his strong body and his ability to hunt and kill. He is proud that he can live like his wild brothers, the wolves. Bookk now thinks and acts like a wolf. His sight, hearing, and smell become very acute. He is intelligent and fast. When he sees a movement in the trees, he moves very quickly. When he hears a sound, he turns immediately. His muscles are like steel. His blood is fresh with energy.
There are no other dogs like Bookk,
says John Thornton one day. Everyone in camp is watching his dog,
There won't be others like him again either.
says Pete,
He's special.
Sure thing.
says Thornton. Bookk is different in the camp. He is sleepy and lazy. He lets Thornton pet him. He lies next to his master or follows him around. He is Thornton's companion. But in the forest, Bookk changes, moving quickly and silently. No animal escapes him. He catches fish, beavers, rabbits. He is a confident hunter. One day, Bookk sees a herd of moose. He chases the herd. One bull moose is alone. Bookk circles the bull moose. The moose charges at him. Bookk follows the herd. He and the bull moose watch each other for 3 days. He is very patient. He doesn't get tired. On the 4th day, he attacks the moose many times. Soon the moose becomes weak. Finally, Bookk kills the moose. He feels proud. He is a stronger hunter than ever now. After the hunt, Bookk decides to return to the camp. He finds a new trail in the forest and follows it. After a while, he sees Nig lying on the ground. He has an arrow in his body. He is dead. 100 meters further down the trail, Bookk sees one of Thornton's sled dogs. He too is dead. Bookk arrives at the camp. He sees hands full of arrows dead on the ground. Nearby, Bookk sees several Yihat Indians dancing around the cabin. He is very angry. This is his camp. He springs on one of the Indians and tears his throat. He jumps on another Indian and kills him too. The Yihats try to kill Bookk with their arrows, but he dodges them. The Yihats are afraid of Bookk. They can't kill him, so they think he must be a devil. He chases them away from the cabin. Bookk returns to the camp, where he finds Pete's body. Full of sadness, he goes down to the stream. It is very quiet there. He finds his master, John Thornton, near the water. He is dead. Bookk stays by the stream and cries and cries. He has a terrible emptiness inside him. His heart aches. His best friend is gone. He sniffs his master's body. Men die so easily, he thinks. It is evening. The moon is bright in the sky. Bookk feels his wild instincts waking up. He hears the sounds of his wild brothers in the forest. He runs back to the place where he met the timber wolf. The sounds are louder. This time, he is ready to obey the call. His master, John Thornton, is dead, and his last connection with humans is gone. Bookk finds the pack of wolves. They are eating the meat of a moose. An old wolf moves towards Bookk. They touch noses. The call is very strong inside Bookk now. He sits down and turns his nose up to the sky. He begins to howl long and loud. The rest of the wolves howl too. This is the end of Book's story. What happened to him next, we will never know. But the Yihat Indians in the Northland still talk about a powerful ghost dog in the remote forests there. They are afraid of it. It steals food, they say, and robs their traps. It kills their dogs. This dog is not always alone. Often, many wolves follow it. It runs at the head of a great pack of wolves. It springs high in the air and howls the call of the wild.